Hello. I would like everyone to take a quick look around their bedroom. Look at the products you have. I'd be willing to bet that a solid 80–90% of the things you own were manufactured in China. Now, this means that anything that happens in China affects us. They make our stuff. Now, for the last few decades, America has been hosting hosting protests about free Tibet. The problem there is that no one knows a whole lot about Tibet. They just know those friendly Buddhists. Never hurt anybody. Well, as often is the case, the situation is much more complicated. The Tibetan people were first conquered by the Chinese in 1950. Before this, they were ruled by a theocracy. The monks enslaved 90% of the population. Now, this wasn't the kind of slavery we had here in Texas. There weren't rules governing it. It wasn't uncommon for a disobedient slave to be given a head start, and the monks would send their hunting dogs afterwards, and that was how they fed their pets. It's a really bad situation. The Dalai Lama kept the country completely isolated. No one could go in or out, so the people remained in poverty. In 1959, the monks revolted against the Chinese because they didn't like losing their slaves and were booted out across the Himalayas into India. From that point onwards, Tibet has moved towards modernity. Now, when talking about Tibet, the most important thing to consider is its geography. Tibet is perhaps the country or the nation with the highest elevation in the world. It is surrounded on three sides by nearly impassable mountains, and to the north by a desert. So isolation was not difficult, but trade was simply impossible to bring in goods. The way this was done was using a group known as Sherpas. You may have heard of them when reading about Mount Everest. They're very strong little men who carry goods on their backs, hundreds and hundreds of pounds. Until the Chinese took over, this was the only way to get goods into the country. It kept the population in ignorance and poverty. The Chinese have worked to alleviate this difficulty under their rule. They've invested in railroads. There are non-stop flights from the coast into the capital, Lhasa, bringing in goods. The country is gradually becoming wealthier. The people in the rural villages still primarily speak Tibetan, but in the cities they've adopted Mandarin. Mandarin, of course, is spoken by well over 1 billion people, and it's a language that can give them contact with the outside world. The Tibetan people are no longer held in bondage. They can see what's going on. They are relatively free. They have a much, much higher standard of living than their grandparents. Running water is kind of nice. Vaccines, electricity, roads that don't disappear. It's become a much better place over time. Now, there's been a whole lot of negativity about China in the news. And that is perfectly fair. It is not the best country in the world. But Tibet, under its independence, was far, far worse. And I don't think you'll find many Tibetans, except the descendants of those monks, who actually object to the changes being made. It is just significantly better off than it used to be.